He was my freshman English teacher. Yeah. I wanted to pull out my transcript and see if he gave me a B or an A. I'm not sure. It actually doesn't matter. Whatever. Dr. Reiff, come on out. Now he's my boss. He was my freshman English teacher. Now, so you guys, I may be your boss someday. Just keep that in mind, okay? Yeah, our willing participant number one. And then number two, I don't really know much about her, so I'm just going to say her name. Ms. Naslund, come on out. No, Naslund's fantastic. Okay, so what these two are going to do. Oh, we've got the wrong period. No, do we? Did I forget to? Oh, I forgot to put a slide for you guys. There you go. They're like two of my favorite people, and I forgot to include them. Yeah, that's how life works. Okay, so they're going to write each a story in about 20 minutes or so, okay? And they don't even know what they're going to write the story about because we're going to help them with that. So here's what I need from you guys. Someone shout out like a type of person. Body. What? Okay, so you have to write about your buddy psychopath. Your buddy psychopath. I need an object. A protractor. You have to include a protractor, okay? And then I need a location. Six Flags Great America. So you've got a protractor, your buddy psychopath, and that is up to you. You know what? I'm going to let you be creative and do what you want with that, okay? All right, get backstage, start writing. Good luck, and we'll see what they come up with later. Today is, I guess, kind of, you could say, a day for storytelling. How many of you have had to write a story for LHS English department stuff at some point? Okay. You guys are going to have to soon, so this might be good information. One of the things that our next guest is going to talk about is the importance of storytelling, not just for like entertainment purposes, but also how it can help with your actual life. So that's maybe just a second reason to listen. But she is an LHS mom. She is a PhD. She has a PhD, I should say. I'm an English teacher, and I can't even use verbs correctly. She has a PhD in English literature, and the reason she's here, really, she has won multiple events. If you've ever heard of MOTH storytelling, anybody heard of MOTH storytelling? Yeah, I kind of thought maybe not. So she'll explain what that is, but she has won multiple MOTH storytelling events. So please welcome to the stage, Risa McDonnel.
The best thing about moving from Chicago to Hartford when I was 12, I'm going to start over. I need to move this down a little bit. There we go. The best thing about moving from Chicago to Hartford when I was 12 was that my grandparents now were only 2 hours away. The worst thing was everything else. One day, I was a happy Midwestern tomboy who wouldn't be caught dead in a skirt. The next, I was wandering adrift in a wasteland of pink and green, the target of a preppy middle school death squad who spoke a foreign language I had never heard before. Oxford shirt, Bermuda bag, chinos. What on God's green earth was with all the little whales all over everything? My tormentors made sure I learned their language well. Dissected frog parts turned up in my non-Bermuda bag purse during science class. Notes about my decidedly un-chino pants were passed in health ed and caught, accidentally on purpose, because they wanted clueless Mr. Doobie to cluelessly read the note out loud so they could snicker when he cluelessly asked, "I don't get it. What's wrong with Risa's pants?" Self-preservation eventually won out over nonconformity, so one day I turned up my collar, I tied a whale-covered sweater over my shoulders and traded my hiking boots for bean boots and the hope of a little peace. Wearing a skin that wasn't my own, of course, accomplished nothing. I would never be one of them, and I didn't really want to, but now I wasn't me anymore either. I felt like a hermit crab caught between shells. On clear nights, I would lie awake, hoping for the fickle magic of late-night AM radio waves that sometimes carried Chicago's WLS station impossibly far and into my staticky little clock radio. When it crackled in, just for a moment, I was home. And then the static would reassert itself and I would cry myself to sleep. But it would be okay. It would be okay. It would all be okay if I could just get myself to the game. The Chicago Cubs were playing at Shea Stadium on July 1st, 1980, and I needed to be there. I had been going to games with my father since I was 5, but now Wrigley Field was 900 miles away, and they didn't televise Cubs games in stupid Hartford. And stupid Hartford didn't even have a stupid baseball team, and there was no internet yet in 1980, let alone social media, and there wasn't even any stupid cable because stupid Hartford was such a stupid backwater. All I had were the pathetic box scores in the stupid Hartford newspaper. And Shea Stadium. Just down the expressway from my grandparents' house, a mere 2 hours away from stupid Hartford, the Cubs would be playing in hostile Mets territory. I could go see them, and I just knew that they would magically sense my presence, and we would bond as fellow refugees, even if theirs was only a temporary exile. We would forge a sympathetic psychic connection, and for a few hours, I could live in my own skin again. But first I had to get there. My utterly deficient parents had scheduled a client dinner that night. They couldn't take me. They refused to see reason when I suggested taking a train and going all by my 13-year-old self, and I didn't know how to hotwire a car. It was a time of great unrest in the Nystrom household, and I still might not be speaking to my parents if my very proper, very ladylike granny hadn't offered to take me to the game. The trouble started as soon as we sat down. We had excellent seats, and Granny, to be known henceforth as Poor Granny, said, well, we'd better be ready to duck if any pop flies come our way. Duck? There wasn't going to be any ducking. Granny, why do you think I brought my mitt? Poor Granny gave me her best Jewish guilt face. Young ladies don't go chasing after baseballs. To which I replied, then it's a good thing I don't see any young ladies around here. I mean, had she even met me? That was the beginning of the end for poor Granny, because I came to play, armed with my Cubs gear and my big mouth. Some drunken lout a few rows ahead made some nasty comments about my Cubs jersey and hat, and he gave me the stink eye every time I urged Bill Buckner to hit it out of the park, or yelled for Dennis Lamp to smoke the batter. Pretty soon I was looking right at this guy, yelling at him as much as I was yelling for the Cubs. Poor Granny noticed. Sit down and be quiet, she whispered. So I doubled down. I high-fived myself when we scored to go up 1-0. I danced a vigorous victory dance when we retired the side scoreless. I rooted with all the snotty fervor of a 13-year-old who has been silenced for too long. Eventually the guy stood up, turned around, pointed at me, and shouted, somebody shut that little girl up before I come shut her up. Risa, I am telling you, sit down and shut up, barked poor Granny, no longer sweet or ladylike, by the way. And for the first time in a very long time, I felt like I had a choice. I could let this belligerent jackhat bully me the way I had let the kids at school bully me. I could let him tell me that I wasn't in Chicago anymore, that I had to do it his way, that I couldn't wear the clothes I wanted to wear if I wanted to remain unharmed. I could sit down and shut up. Or I could yell, oh yeah, you old geezer, I want to see you come make me shut up. And he did. Or at least he tried. He actually got up and started toward me, and if I'd had any sense at all, I would have been scared. But this was no longer about a game. This was personal, and I wasn't going to take it anymore. I brandished the only weapon I had, a large Diet Coke, ready to throw it in his face. Poor Granny looked like she was having a stroke, and he kept on coming. And 2 uniformed police officers showed up out of nowhere and hauled his sorry butt away. I was now ready to sit down and shut up. And then the second inning began. When the Cubs eventually won, because of course they won, those same officers reappeared at the end of the game and asked if they could escort us to our car. Apparently, my would-be attacker was a well-known drug dealer who had been under surveillance for some time, and by threatening me, he gave them an excuse to detain him. New York's finest were worried that this gentleman's associates might not take kindly to my interference, and they wanted to make sure no one followed us out to the parking lot. That was it for poor Granny. She didn't say a word to me the whole way home, and when we got there, she poured herself a stiff scotch and shoved me at my parents in a most unladylike manner, snarling, "Next year, you take her." I didn't care. My superpower had just been revealed to me. I was a Cubs fan. And not just any Cubs fan, I was a crime-fighting Cubs fan. That's who I really was, had always been, and always would be. That sad exile wandering around the pink and green tundra of Hartford? That wasn't me. She was just my secret identity. And armed with that knowledge, I knew that it would be okay. It would be okay. It would all be okay. Thank you. Okay, I'm going to do things a little bit differently than I did last period, so I have cut a whole lot out of my notes, because now I'm going to go home and write a story about the storyteller who was so excited about sharing her craft that she really didn't think about the fact that a PowerPoint is kind of the antithesis of storytelling. So let me start by asking people to just shout out, what do you think that story was about? Okay, see, I just heard a whole bunch of different things, and that's good. A good story will do that. The reason for that is because we all connect with stories in our own personal way, because stories tap into our common experiences and our common humanity. We tell stories all the time, multiple times a day. You've probably told at least 5 already today. Sometimes they're impromptu stories. Oh my God, girlfriend, you would not believe what just happened in the locker room. Sometimes we write our stories, and sometimes they're fiction. They're not even about ourselves. And sometimes we are in conversation. Oh yeah, that happened to me too. Let me tell you about it. We tell stories all the time. Today, we're talking about telling personal stories, and we're talking about speaking them out loud. And what I have to say about stories really applies across the board, regardless of what kind you're telling. But I'm focusing specifically on this particular kind of storytelling. So why do we tell stories all the time? Because they're entertaining. True, but why do we find them so entertaining? Well, they give meaning to our personal experiences. Life comes at us from 1,000 different directions. We can't possibly even process it all. We certainly can't give all of it equal weight. And so stories are a way of picking and choosing for ourselves what is important in our lives. What priority do we give them? What meaning do we take out of them, and how do we process them? And in so doing, they help us recognize those common experiences. I chose my story today because even though I was in middle school and not high school, I figured it's still probably related. You might not have connected so much with some of my stories about when my son was a baby, and also he would have killed me. But stories tap into that commonality. They also teach us new information and new perspectives. I could have told you a story today about hiking up a volcano in Italy, and you probably would have learned a lot of new information. Maybe something you could use on a science quiz. Maybe something about Lord of the Rings, believe it or not. But you still would have found things that felt familiar that you would have connected with, and that's the power of stories. They are, in short, the glue of humanity. Question. There's another reason I told this particular story. Ever wonder why superheroes' alter egos are such dysfunctional people? It's because they can't share their stories with anyone. They can't share their best stories. If you're Batman and you just tossed Joker into a vat of acid and watched him dissolve and saved Gotham City, you'd be jazzed and you'd want to go tell somebody. You can't. You might also feel conflicted because of what you had to do to a fellow human being, and you couldn't really talk to anyone about that either, so you don't get to share your worst stories with anyone. And therefore, they're not sharing their true selves with anyone. Superman is Superman. Clark Kent is his disguise. So really, he's Superman, but nobody can know that. So nobody can know him. You can't establish trust. You can't establish emotional connection if you can't share your stories. But storytelling is also a tool. It's a really important life skill that cuts across almost anything you will ever do in your life. Done well, storytelling gives us superpowers that connect us to the people around us. I'm going to just do a quick few out of the larger list I gave last period, but one is persuasion. We see it all the time on television shows, right? The story about the love story that led to the purchase of the brand spanking new Mercedes-Benz with a big red bow on Christmas morning. That's storytelling. The persuasion is getting you to buy the Mercedes-Benz. It's also, does anybody here do debate? How often do you use some kind of a story when you're writing your debate because it humanizes and illustrates what you're trying to argue? Every single time. Yep. Conflict resolution. When we are heated up about things that are really pointing out our differences, sitting down and sharing our personal stories with each other helps us to see each other as human beings and find the things we have in common instead of the things that we don't. This is actually a specific piece of most conflict resolution training programs. Leadership. Now, I'm not putting any religion out there. I'm just based on literature, history, or whatever. What would Jesus do when it came to storytelling? He told parables. Adaptability is another good skill that storytelling teaches you because we have to adjust our stories constantly, depending on who our audience is. We have to learn to read the room. We have to learn when a story flops, why it flops, fix it, change it, understand the context in which we are telling our stories and why we're telling our stories to that particular audience. I have told this story several times, and I tell it differently every time. Depends who I'm telling the story to. And finally, storytelling is creativity, and creativity leads to problem solving. The more creative you get with your stories, the more you tinker with them, the more you realize, okay, I only have 5 minutes and this one's gonna take 10, I have to fix that problem. All of that translates into your ability to come up with plan B in the real world. So how do we use storytelling for fun and profit? College application essays. There's one that's pretty relevant, I would imagine, right? How many of you know what you're gonna write your essay about? My guess is you're thinking big world themes. And you're thinking leadership, I was the captain of this, the president of that. And I can tell you right now, admissions counselors will read thousands upon thousands of those essays and toss them in the slush pile. I do sometimes tutor students who are writing their college essays, and this summer I helped a young man who wrote his college application essay about working in an Oriental rug warehouse. But that's not really what his essay was about. The story was the frame for him to talk about his consciousness of his privilege as an upper middle class white young man going to a private school on the North Shore, about his love of history and his hope to study it, about his love of music and his lengthy experience in a very formalized choral program through which he sang overseas, and so on and so forth. But the essay was a story about working in a rug warehouse. Job interviews, you will always be asked, tell me about one of your greatest successes or one of your greatest failures. If you can tell a story about a focused, isolated event that taught you something, you will be much likelier to get the job than somebody who says, oh, I increased revenues 5,000%. Okay, what kind of revenues? Where did you do this? How did you do this? You need a story. Science. There are lies, dirty lies, and statistics. Because statistics are just numbers. It's what you see in the numbers and the story that you interpret them to tell that makes the difference. Okay, so final thoughts. Keep it real. Tell your own stories, not someone else's. Less is more. No one wants to hear your entire life story. Just focus on the good parts. And by good, I mean interesting, not only the good things that happen to you. Have a purpose in mind. Listen and look around. The best stories come from unexpected life experiences. Get out there and tell your stories. The only failed stories are the ones you don't tell. And finally, everyone has a story. Everyone. Okay, questions. Ask me about the moth, ask me about tools, ask me about my story, whatever you want. Yep. So the Moth Radio Hour is on NPR, and that is not a competition, and most of the time it's you actually pitch them and they pick you and they work with you to tell the story. But they have story slams in cities all over the world. Once a month, they have it twice a month in Chicago, once in downtown and once in Evanston. Each month there's a theme, and if you want to tell a story, you get 5 minutes. You have to tell it without any notes. It has to fit the theme. And you show up and you put your name in a hat and they pick 10 people over the course of the show. They have audience judging panels who score you, and somebody wins at the end of the evening. So they record all of them. So sometimes people who tell their stories at slams get on the radio too, but that's not why you go. And what's fascinating is routinely they will pack the house, 200 or more people, and it's a hot night of 20 people put their names in the bag. So people aren't going to tell their stories, they're going to hear them. Other questions? Yes, in fact, it was. My mother was so proud. Yes. My whole life. But I will tell you this, I did not have the guts to be a starving artist when I got out of school. So I joined the corporate track, and then I went and I got my PhD, and then for the last 23 years, I've been a higher education consultant. And I was kind of frustrated about never having time to write. So about 5 or 6 years ago, a friend of mine who was a writer said, go do story slams. You can find time to write a 5-minute story. You will tell it in front of an audience, and you will get immediate feedback. And it will help you hone your craft and be part of a creative community until you have the time to write that novel. By the way, I started that novel during the pandemic because I went on furlough. It'll be a few years before it's done, though. Okay? Excuse me. You know, it went back literally at least to kindergarten. But I think in first grade, I had a very good first grade teacher who noticed that I liked to tell stories. That was how I conveyed information. And she encouraged me to sit down at the typewriter during free periods and just tap things out. And she let me read them to the class. Well, you know, some of us are shy and retiring, and it's really hard for us to get up on stage. No, that is true, but I'm not one of those people. I've been a big extrovert my whole entire life, and I also was a musician for most of my growing up. So I was really comfortable on stage already. That said, I still get nervous every single time I get up here, and I have to work really hard for you not to hear the quiver in my voice as my diaphragm flops all over the place.
While we hear from Dr. Reiff and Ms. Naslund, and then we have 2 more minutes for questions at the end, but do young people ever win the MOTH competition?
Yes, so if you are under 21, you probably want to bring a parent with you because usually the slams are done in bars and clubs, and they won't let you in without a parent. That said, one of the best stories I've ever heard at one of the Chicago slams was told by a 14-year-old girl who got up and talked about her battle with anorexia. And I will tell you this, a lot of people get up and tell stories about really awful stuff or inspiring stuff, and you would think, oh, they're gonna win. But if it's not a good story, they don't win. It's something we all enjoy listening to, but it doesn't make the same connection when it's not a story. So this girl got up and she just told a really killer story. And my name got picked right after her, and I had to go follow that act. So that was not my best night, but she won.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Can we give a round of applause
Thank
to
you, guys.
Risa McDonnel? Thank you so much. Even as someone who sometimes likes to write stories myself, that's extremely helpful stuff. Yeah, why don't you go ahead and stay? Well, Dr. Reiff and Ms. Naslund, please come back to the stage. Oh, Dr. Reiff finished this time. Oh, good. There's an obvious story behind that, but we won't tell it. Okay, who do you guys want to hear from first? Yeah, Naslund was the first word I heard, so Naslund, you get to share first. You can use the microphone, it's up to you. Do you guys remember what they were supposed to include? A buddy psychopath, Six Flags, Great America, and everyone's favorite, the protractor.
I'm just going to say I'm a much better writer than this is going to show you. Because how long did we have? 15 minutes, and I was using paper because my computer was doing a blinky blinky thing when I turned it on. Okay. Oh, sorry. Oh my goodness. Okay. It doesn't even look like chicken nuggets. Look, buddy, just eat them. We have to get back to work. If Kevin has to run the Viper one more time, we're totally going to be fired, I said. I was tired of Buddy, really tired of him. I'm going to kill this chicken nugget, Buddy growled. I think I saw some drool trickle from Buddy's mouth. Don't kill the chicken, Buddy. I patted him on the back and did my best to smile. It wasn't always like this. Buddy had been a really sweet kid. The type of kid who would give you the shirt off of his back, the sandwich out of his lunch, the one working controller for the Xbox. Buddy would give anyone anything. But back in middle school, kids like Buddy didn't last long. In fact, their kindness was never appreciated. It was laughed at. It was mocked. It was weaponized. And one day in particular, it was Buddy's disaster. Derek, who never studied for a test, who rarely did anything requiring any level of effort, who thought that he was above any sort of amount of kindness, walked into math class without his protractor. Not the end of the world, except today was the final exam. Derek was essentially screwed. Except there sat Buddy. And there sat Buddy's protractor. And when Buddy, in all of his kindness, reached behind him to prevent Monique's runaway pencil from hitting the floor, Derek capitalized on the moment to furtively snatch Buddy's protractor right off of his desk. As Mr. G handed out the tests, Buddy, confused, raised his hand. Mr. G, I can't find my protractor. Well, Buddy, I think that's a YP, not an MP. A your problem, not a my problem. Buddy, dejected, looked down at his paper and knew that this was it. This was the moment his dad had warned him about. The moment his life was over. The moment he would have to drop out of school and get a job at Six Flags. Buddy failed the test. And even with Buddy's stolen protractor, so did Derek. So here we are today eating chicken nuggets on our lunch break. I nudged Buddy with my shoulder, urging him to stop sending murderous glares at his lunch. Buddy, let's go. Is this vegan? I pulled him up from his chair, and we began our walk back to the Viper. I popped into my position as the line monitor, making sure no one cut in front of little kids, and Buddy took his spot behind the controls, the ones that regulated the speed, the brakes, and the general comfort of the ride. As I began loading the next group of passengers, I saw Buddy glaring as if his chicken nuggets were back. And when I looked at what he was glaring at, I saw Derek.
Awesome. Even the most routine events in our lives can present the unexpected if we keep our eyes open. Even the most mundane chores can prompt something baffling as well as something disturbing. For instance, I walk my dog every day. A few months ago, my dog pooped on one of my neighbor's lawns. This happens frequently. He can't always hold it until we get to the park. I'm always a little nervous and embarrassed and worried my neighbors will get upset. So imagine my relief when Dexter pooped, and at that moment, my neighbor pulled up in her car. I was sure to sort of flourish the poop bag in the air as I cleaned up after Dex. I said, "Sorry about this." She said, "It can't be helped." How marvelous, how beautiful. I wasn't sure how she'd react. It can't be helped. 4 lovely words that reflected she understood. She sympathized, she empathized. I felt like she was my buddy, someone I could take to Six Flags. But last week, as I walked Dex to the park, my neighbor had placed signs right at the edge of the sidewalk where it meets the lawn that said, "Keep off and stay out." I was shocked. Why the change? I didn't picture a Six Flags buddy anymore. I pictured some kind of psychopath. I expected her to charge at me and Dexter wielding a protractor and yelling at me to be gone and beware. The marvelous human I had appreciated for her compassion and awareness vanished. Any old ordinary person, defensive and protective, replaced her. So now I walk on the other side of the street, careful to avoid her lawn. Makes me grateful for those who don't put up "keep off" and "stay out" signs. They're better neighbors and they're better people. That's a harsh judgment. After all, I think the psychopath and the buddy reside in each of us. Although probably not inside my dog Dex. He's 100% buddy.
That was awesome. So, of like the 4 different faculty events that we do during Writers Expo, I've participated in 3 of them, not 4 of them for a reason, because that scares me to death. So, another round of applause, because that was amazing. Did you time it, Naz? Was it 15 minutes?
I'm sorry, what?
Did you time it? It was 15 minutes that you had to write?
I think so.
Wow, that's really impressive. Okay, so a couple questions. First, Dr. Reiff, Ms. Naslund, what was your first thought when you actually sat down and now had to write? Besides maybe like crap or something like that.
Well, just trying to weave those ideas together that you all gave us. I have no idea how to write about a psychopath. So the first thing I thought was like someone wanting to do something that doesn't make any sense. And so the last text I received was from my daughter. She goes to Michigan State, and she had texted me about today's lunch, and it was disgusting chicken nuggets. So I just went with, oh, maybe the psychopath wants to kill his chicken nuggets, and that's how I started.
Let's see, so what was I thinking when I first sat down to start writing?
Yeah.
I think the challenge, and it was actually when you were speaking, you were kind of talking about the difference between writing an essay and writing a story. And I can write an essay pretty well, so I found it a challenge to keep writing in the narrative mode. So that was what I was trying to do most. And I think I still kind of editorialize more, but yeah, I was just like, what can we possibly do? And that just happened, and it's fresh in my mind, so I just tried to incorporate reality into these words, you know.
Yeah, totally. So I got 2 more questions, and then we're going to throw it to you guys, so get ready. Number 1, at what point did you realize how you were going to end it? Because it's always impressive to me that you can actually get it to a point of closure in that time frame. So, yeah, tell us about that.
That's what I was the most stressed out about, was that I didn't want to come back here with something not finished. So I just kept looking at the clock, and I thought, I have to get somewhere. Where am I going to get? Where am I going to get? And I thought, I always think full circle. Like, I've got to get it back to what, you know, like for this one where he was in middle school with that guy Derek. How is he going to show up again, or, you know, whatever. So I was just trying, like, how do I get him back in the story? And he just showed up to ride the Viper, as Derek does.
Yeah, and I was, same thing, I was real conscious of the time, so I tried to tell a very small story because I knew we didn't have a lot of time. So I tried to circle back, and I didn't want to end on a bummer note, you know, so I was like, oh, she's not a good human, and that's kind of a downer. So I was like, let's lighten it up, and we'll just talk about dogs. Everybody loves dogs.
And were either of you like me, where I'm like, shoot, which one's the protractor? Or did you know exactly what it was?
Wait, is it the plastic thing that looks like a half circle?
That was my first thought, but then I was like,
good,
wait, what's the one with the little spiky thing with
That's
the...
a compass, right?
Okay, all right.
I was just picturing something unwieldy that I don't know how to use and I'm not familiar with because it sounds too mathematical.
So it's the plastic half circle, is that? Okay. And that was the weapon. I love it. The image of that's great.
I guess I was thinking more like a slide rule. That's not what a
Okay.
protractor is?
Was
Okay.
it 1941?
Yeah, whoever came up with that, well done. That was fantastic.
What do you use a protractor even for? I forget. Just measuring them? You don't draw them with that. Or you do?
Are there any math teachers in here?
You could weaponize one though, right?
All right, do you guys have any questions for our writers? It could be for Dr. Reiff, Ms. Naslund, or Ms. McDonnell. It's up to you. If there's anything you would like to throw their way about writing, about life, you know. Was there anyone else who has I don't, but I was just wondering this between Derek and Dexter. I was like, gee, I wonder if there's anyone in the audience with the first name that starts with the letter D who's now kind of offended that we've got two. No?
Yeah, 'cause
Okay.
you had Dexter. My name's Diane.
Oh, that's a good point. Yeah. See, I told you, I know nothing about you, so couldn't even introduce you.
I just
All
want
right.
to say that doing this kind of thing is very stressful, but it's also a lot of fun. So as we look ahead to next year and reigniting, kind of getting our momentum going again with Writers Week, you should all think about participating in Writers Week. Just come up with a few words, write something, share it with Mr. Tooley, and share your work. It's great fun. It's very anxiety-inducing, but it's also very fun to just share your art with others. That's why we have this. The heart and soul of it is student participation. We want the spotlight to be on you more than any of us.
Were you guys nervous on stage?
Say again, Matt?
Were you nervous while on stage?
Yeah, I was glad I was working with Diane. She always relaxes me and telling funny stories about chicken nuggets. You know, it's always good. So, a little bit.
Nugget stories. I really don't tell funny stories about chicken nuggets. I was nervous, yeah. But I think when we teach in front of students, we know our material so well, and we're, comfortable in that environment. It's our classroom. It's students we know. But when you're in front of, especially even our peers, like the English teachers who are in here and the other teachers who are here, it's kind of vulnerable to, I'm putting something out here that I created and it could be horrible, and you just, you're throwing it out there for people to judge. So that's a little nerve-wracking.
Yeah, Risa, were you at all nervous about that, or?
Well, as I said before, I'm always nervous. I just try to cover it. But I was actually thankful that I was speaking and not submitting written work to all these other English teachers, because while I pride myself on my correct writing, all the creative writing I've been doing during the pandemic has me doing really funky things with commas. So now I get confused, and I'm just really happy not to have had any of you guys see any of that.
How has that been writing during the pandemic? Has that been freeing? Has it been?
For me, it was. I have a very weird job situation that I won't go into, but I basically volunteered to go on furlough, and it turned into 2 years. I didn't realize it would. But the first thing I did was, oh my God, now I actually have time to write. My husband is working all day. Granted, everyone was at home, but my son is in school during the day too. I have a day with several hours in it to write. So I actually started by finding some online Zoom-type free writing seminars where you would just gather with people there'd be a topic and you'd turn off your camera and write for 15 minutes, whatever came into your head, and then you would share. And the hubris of thinking that because I have a PhD in English and I used to teach English literature that I could be a creative writer and just hit it like that. It's been learning a lot of craft. But it's been brilliant.
Yeah. Awesome. A round of applause for our 3 participants and the presenters. Thanks so much, folks, for coming. I hope to see you Monday. Again, Rach Jackson will be here, fantastic poet.